For today's project we're going to paint the bladeguard ancient. I've started off with a white undercoat followed by using fenrisian grey to cover the main armoured areas. Next, for the under armour, because the primary armour is quite light in colour, I've used Mechanicus standard grey first for those under armour areas. This is followed by using null oil in these areas afterwards to give a darker colour next to the otherwise light colour of the armour. Next, a 50-50 mix of lime medium and rust grey was applied into the recesses to give a bit of depth into the armoured areas. Now for areas like the cloth and pouches and holsters, and also the totem that the bladeguard ancient is using. I wanted these areas to be red, but I wanted to keep it dark to give a contrast from the light colour of the armour, so corn red. These red areas are now having Bugman glow applied to pick out some of the edges and highlights, and this is the last colour we're using for the red areas of the miniature, which is Carroburg Crimson, and again this will further darken down this area of the miniature. Going back to the grey parts of the armour, wulfen grey was applied to the edges of these areas to pick out some of the detail, followed by some white scar. The white scar was used in a smaller amount just to pick out the very tips of the edges. Various silvers were used in the metallic areas, and after the silvers had time to dry, a null oil was applied to those areas, especially in recesses. And you'll also notice for the pole for the totem, I initially applied one coat of null oil to cover the entire area. Once this was dried, a further coat of the null oil was applied to the top area near the hand and also at the bottom of the totem, and also as well the very bottom of the totem was not painted in silvers, it was painted in gold instead. And the reason for this is I know that I'm going to have eye spaces on these miniatures, so silver is going to look very similar to the colour for the eye spaces, hence that's why at the bottom it's going to end up being gold to make it stand out a little bit from the bottom of the base. Here Uriel yellow was used for the shoulder pad, which is the darkest yellow I've got, which is why I'm using this particular yellow, because I want to try and darken the miniature down some. And Gehenna's gold was applied first into the golden areas, which takes a couple of coats to build up the initial gold. And then Auric Armour gold was applied next, and then Auric Armour gold was applied to some of the areas where I want some highlights. And you'll notice on the totem I'm applying the highlight at the bottom of the totem rather than the top. Once the gold paints were dry, I then used Agrax Earth Shade over all of the gold areas. The reason why I've done it this way and I've put the darkest colour last is it helps therefore to tone down the gold further, rather than using the dark colours and then applying the highlights making it look brighter. I want to try and keep the miniature dark where I can. The totem had a second coat of Agrax Earth Shade on the sides, only this time I applied quite a heavy coat, and I then left the miniature upside down to encourage the fluid to flow downwards, helping to give a bit more darkness to the totem. You'll notice how in this video I haven't covered how I painted the skeleton. The reason for this is I've done two previous videos, one covering how to paint bone in a light colour and one how to paint bone in a dark colour. I chose to use a dark colour for this because of the miniature being so light. However, if you're painting the miniature in a different colour to this and it's a dark colour for your armour, then you might want to pick the lighter colour instead. However, both of these videos will be put in the description if you want to watch them. For the purity seals, the wax part was painted with corn red, and the parchments were painted initially with Upshabti bone, followed by pallid witch flesh going down the edges, just to pick out the edges slightly, and lastly a 50-50 mix of Abaddon black and null oil was used for the writing on the areas. If you like the video, remember to subscribe to help the channel, and also send links to your friends.